You. What's going on? It's Terrell, Hall of Fame, D-Line, and this is Bully Rants. Breeding out. Okay, so you bought your dog. It's supposed to be a show dog. The dog turns out to be Easty Westy. The dog turns out to have a bad back. The dog turns out to have a heart issue. The dog turns out to have whatever. This is simple. Don't breed the dog. Now there are situations where the feet may be slightly one way or the other. Okay, maybe you say, let's do some research. And what I mean by research, let's put into this instance. If you have an Easty Westy dog, for those that don't know, that means the feet kick out like that. Now, if his father, his grandfather, his mother, his grandmother, maybe we'll go back to great-grandparents, none of them had this, and his is slight, there's a very good chance that that dog's feet will be, your puppy's feet won't come out with that. Maybe it was something when he was being raised, not enough vitamin D or whatever, and the bone sort of turned on him, maybe he was too heavy. Now you're doing an analytical thing because you're putting the numbers together to figure out, okay, is this really in his genes, or is this just something that happened and it's slight and we have a high chance? Now, I don't care how good the parents are, if them feet are turned all the way out and it just looks horrible, don't breed the animal. And this is basic. Now, because typically what can happen, and y'all have heard me say this a million times, is that you call yourself breeding out, but without proper research, you can actually double up on a gene and make it worse. So say you have that same Easty Westy dog, but your female is beautiful, tight feet, straight legs, just beautiful. But if you really studied her pedigree and you went back, her grandmother on one side had slightly Easty Westy feet. Her grandfather on the other side, let's say great-grandfather, he had slightly Easty Westy feet. Now you're looking at an equation to where you have in this gene pool at least 3 dogs that have this gene to have feet turn out like that. Compounding a gene isn't just simple math. Sometimes it's multiplication. Sometimes when a gene is compounded on, it can become far worse than what you thought. It can become terrible, horrific in some cases. And this is what we see happen in a lot of these dogs, is that you look at the parents and the parents might have a little bit of a bowed elbow, or the parents might not be all the way up to snuff on different things. Well, what tends to happen is if this thing gets compounded, right, you can have it go so raw to the point to where you have to put these dogs down. I've seen a dog myself that I know for a fact had a heart murmur. This particular dog lived to be 5 or 6 years old with the heart murmur and heart issues. A lot of his puppies, because of the way that these dogs were bred and sometimes line bred of his own blood, a lot of his puppies had to be put down well before a year old. Same thing with the hips. I know of a dog that had bad hips. They kept continuously breeding this dog with these horrible hips. And although he lived a long life with his bad hips and it didn't really destroy his life, a lot of his offspring before 18 months old had to be put down. One particular litter, every single puppy in that litter developed very, very terrible degenerative hips, and it had to go away. And people were all shocked because in our minds we think, okay, it will only be as bad as his dad's. That's not the way genetics work. You never know what was underlying, and we haven't got to that point of scientific perfection to where we can look at a chart and see all these different things of, hey, this was there and this was there, don't do this, don't do that. So we're breeding off of our eyes and we're breeding off of our history. And it also hurts when your history is a lot of times faked on paperwork. But that was a previous video. But the thing that we have to do is we have to be discretion. We have to be very discretionary, and we have to go into these dogs' pedigrees. It's just like when you go to the doctor and they ask you, do you have a history of diabetes in your family? If you have that history of diabetes in your family, it's a higher chance that you're going to have diabetes. The same thing with any other issue. It's a higher chance. So we have to treat it the same way that we do with dogs. If your dog has heart murmurs, this is why you're not supposed to breed a dog with a heart murmur, because they're going to pass it on. You might think you were the slickest person in the world and 2 of the dogs come up and they don't have heart murmurs. Well, guess what? They still pass it on. So the next litter, when they start dropping puppies, now they're kicking out heart murmurs left and right, and you can't. Well, you want to say you can't figure out why, but you put it in there. The only way to make all of these dogs better is eliminating genetics, eliminating certain genes that are destroying the breed. This is the way all breeds were made. This is the way all breeds were perfected. Sometimes you'll have. I think I talked about this before. I think it was the King Charles Spaniel, however you say that. Too many names. But the King Charles, it had a issue with epilepsy. A lot of the dogs were having seizures, and they found out it all went back to this one dog that was heavily populated in the breed. And what was happening is it was constant compounding, because although it was in the back end of the pedigree, and you couldn't see it if you looked at the first 3 generations, this one dog was all over the pedigree. So even it was compounded from the back, but we already know, just like any other little family tree, that all transfers to the middle. It came down through each and every generation. So when you took it to another dog that had those same generations in there, this gene was compounded, and what you had was dogs getting to 2-3 years old and just having serious seizures, to the point where they would have to put them down. The way that they changed that, because it was so deep into their breed, is they brought in dogs that didn't have his genetics in them at all, and started to weaken the genes. And that's a great thing, because that's something that's not physical. But what they did in that situation is that they did it very, very calculated. Is they weakened the genes by making sure that his gene pool was not being touching each other anymore. It had to go to something outside to make sure that these issues didn't arise again. A smart plan when you are stuck in a situation where you just have to do it because it's so heavily populated in the dogs. We can look at that same situation in the American Bully, to where you've had dogs like Dax and other dogs who've had terrible issues. I know Remy's father, Blue Ruckus, had terrible hips. So Remy didn't have terrible hips. So when you look at it, a lot of Remy line dogs, people think, oh, let's take them to Dax, and no, you just compounded a terrible hip gene. So we have to be very, very diligent in our research to make sure that we're not overlapping these genes. And then when they do manifest and come forward, and we get a chance to visually see them, we have to have the balls to say, you know what, even though I paid so many $1,000s for this dog, I'm not going to breed it because the dog is just not healthy. This is the only way that we can progress going forward. If we do anything outside of that, we're going to keep on being basically like that little mouse on the wheel, just running in with a ton of energy in the same space, going nowhere. And maybe for this breed, going backwards. So with all that being said, man, study your pedigrees, have the balls to eliminate the dogs that do nothing for you. If it's an issue, it's an issue. They still make good pets most of the time. But if you are chasing for perfection in this breed, like many of us are, it's time to act that way and eliminate dogs with issues. Healthy dogs matter. That is our mission. That is what we're pushing for. We want strong, healthy dogs. It doesn't mean they have to be skinny. It doesn't mean any of that. I have 100-pound dogs that can run with the best of them in 90 to 100 degree heat, for a good while before they're looking for some shade and they're out there playing and sunbathing. So that's genetics. And I'm not just saying myself, I know others do. And that's why I only mess with their dogs. Picking the right genetics. Until next time, man, God bless y'all. I will catch you later. Peace.